An intellectual carrot, the mind boggles.
You see? You see? Your stupid minds. Stupid! Stupid!
Earth has had Santa Claus long enough. We will bring him to Mars.
I've been afraid a lot of times in my life, but I didn't know the real meaning of fear until I had kissed Becky.
One thing will be clear. It's not for man to interfere in the ways of God.
It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Earth vs. Soup, episode 150. I'm Aaron Pollier.
I'm Darlene.
We watched the classic from 1968, 2001, A Space Odyssey today. We've been threatening that we were going to watch it. I haven't watched it in a few years, at the very least. Darlene, you have never watched the whole thing.
I know why.
You know why. Before we even begin, this is one of your least favorite movies. In fact, I would go so far as to say you hate it.
I will say that it isn't a movie. It's a light show, a noise. To me, it was just a bunch of noise that the music was. If you have problems with seizures, if you have problems like I do with noise, you do not want to watch this movie.
Okay.
Anxiety gets, and the music will give you anxiety if you have that problem.
It's
and I'm 142 minutes long. It was released in 1968, April 2nd on Uptown Theater.
Mm-hmm.
April 3rd, the U.S., May 15th in the UK. It had a $10.5 million budget and made $146 million in the
box office. Yeah, and it's arguably one of the most influential and important science fiction movies ever made. And I'm on the exact opposite end of it. I would say, well, yes, if you have a medical condition that prevents you from seeing flashing lights, do not watch this movie. The music is both literally atmospheric, because one of the pieces of music that's played is called Atmospheres. It is integral to the movie experience to actually hear the music that's in it. It is all classical music. Some of it is discordant, but discordant for purposes. It is confusing because you must be able to make your own decisions of what certain things mean in it. It has been clarified over the years what some of the things in this movie do mean, because Kubrick...
it's not a movie, though. There is no plot to it. And
I would argue that this is one of the most solid plots I've ever seen in any of the movies that we've watched. And we're gonna sit on... It's
a premise, not a plot.
I, again, would disagree. I completely stand on the opposite side of you on this. And that's fine. We can disagree. The plot is very... It's very clear what the plot is to me in this. And I can sum up the plot by saying mankind encounters an alien presence. I shouldn't say mankind. Hominids encounter an alien presence. And because of that change, we go to 2001, where mankind has evolved into a technological tool-using society, and mankind encounters the same alien presence. And they discover that it is talking to other pieces of itself. Like, one monolith is talking to the other, so they send out a mission to go and actually try to find where the signal from the first monolith went, and they program the computer improperly, and the computer basically makes the mission more difficult. The computer is a victim just as much as everybody else is, but in the end, mankind again makes contact with this alien presence, and one person evolves into something new. Like, it is a plot. There is a plot here.
I don't think that's a plot. I think that's a premise.
Okay, well, we'll disagree. That's fine. Um, you have never seen this movie all the way through. You usually give up at some point in it, right?
It gave me a headache, and I'm dealing with the headache right now.
Um, and I've seen this likely a couple dozen times,
I don't ever want to see it again.
and I'm going to. I after watching it, I can since I haven't watched it in a few years, I did not recall a lot of the very, very well done stuff in it that's going to actually that actually is some stuff that I just noticed for the first time. Like I noticed little details in it. I have a new appreciation for the matte work, which took over a year to accomplish.
I'm not saying it isn't an artwork. I'm saying it's not a movie. It's not.
Again, I'll okay. It's not a movie, but let's go through the plot because we have all these different scenes that lead into another. We
and
actually
it just leads into another. That's all it feels like it does.
okay. I'm looking at it because I again disagree. There is a plot here. I mean, we can disagree. That's fine. But I can go through the plot here that I have written down and all the scenes that do lead into each other and grow the story. So I don't know if this is we can disagree on whether that makes a movie or a story, but regardless, we do start with a mood setting, okay, where Kubrick allows black screen to be there.
Too long.
You feel too long, I feel an appropriate amount of time, and it's playing music to get you in the mood. It's supposed to me it represents the void before creation. A lot of the stuff in this is very artistic, and I don't think it would work if it was not there. There's we get the MGM logo right after that. So that tends to make me feel that it isn't about the void, that it was just there to set a mood rather than a specific thing about it. It was more of, hey, Kubrick wants to have some music to get people ready for the movie. So you have the MGM logo, and then you have one of the most iconic pieces of music ever to play, and we have a moonrise over an earthrise over a sunrise, and it is an amazing piece of cinematography. The special effect in this is great. And we have a title card that comes up, and it's The Dawn of Man, and it's on the African savannah. It's 4 million years ago, I think. They say 4 million or it's 3 million, one of the two. And what's interesting here is a lot of the stuff that was filmed for these scenes with the early hominids are not rear projection. They're actually this really strange front projection of photographs. So it's not really a matte painting that's ever in the background. It's actually front projected photographs. But the reason there's some weirdness with how this actually had to happen. That's why when we see the cheetah in these scenes,
we have the monkey man and a cheetah that attacks.
Yeah, when we see the cheetah, its eyes are always glowing, and it's because of the front projection effect that's going on. That basically the background is being projected onto it from where the camera is. So that's why you get this weird reflection in its eyes.
I will say this is art, not, like I said, not a movie.
Okay, yep, that's fine.
And there's where I go.
It's beautiful, right? Silence. Okay.
Yes,
so
it's pretty, but it's boring to me.
And I was engrossed. Like, again, we're on completely different sides on this. You were bored by it. I was engrossed by it. Okay. We have a band of hominids, early hominids. This is very early on.
We have two tribes.
Yes, but we're introduced to one, and they're at a watering hole. They're scavenging. They're starving. They're being preyed upon by a cheetah. And they're living in close proximity to a group of what looks to be tapirs, which are kind of like a pig-like animal. They wouldn't have been around 4 million years ago, likely. I don't know. I didn't look it up, but it seems to me like that might have been something that was weird. Regardless, they're living in harmony with them, like many other animals do together in close proximity, that they're not really preying on each other. So the tapirs have no reason to fear them. And then another tribe of uh, of hominids comes in and knocks the first group away from
Their watering hole.
their watering hole. Now here,
Runs them off.
um,
And the cheetah then is sitting on a zebra as night falls.
and watching them, and its eyes are glowing because of this front projection,
the ape men are sitting in a cave or up against a thing,
like an overhang. It's a rocky overhang,
and they hear the cheetah growling.
There's two things that are both in the credits and are explained in the book a little better. That the leader of the first band of hominids is actually named Moonwatcher, because he watches the moon for whatever reason. Like, that's the moon has always interested him, and we do get a shot of him actually looking at the moon that night. The leader of the tribe of other hominids is called like One Ear. Anyway, he's not that important. It's more of that Moonwatcher has always looked up when other people have discounted the lights in the sky. Okay? So they all fall asleep, and he's watching. He sees like members of his tribe that are like cuddling in the dark, afraid, that kind of stuff. They wake up, and there's a monolith there. And they're confused, they're frightened. They do their standard like howling and thumping on the ground, jumping and screaming. And they realize that it's not moving. It's something different to them. And they finally stop kind of screaming at it to go away, and they end up like touching it, because it's now kind of a part of the environment. It's not something that's alive that they need to be scared of. It's not doing anything to them, that sort of thing. So again, this is a time, it seems to be a time of drought, a time where there's starvation even in the tribe, and Moonwatcher is picking through the bones of a dead tapir. It could have been a tapir, and he picks up one of the bones, the leg bones, and just kind of thumps it against the ground, and has the idea to start using it as a tool. Like, this is so early on in our evolution that we hadn't even really started using tools yet. And he smashes the bones of this tapir using this one leg bone. The
skeleton.
And
the skull.
Yeah, the skull. But he starts making the connection in his mind that maybe, just maybe, I can use this leg bone to kill tapirs so we can eat them. Because we're starving, because there's those flashes of him smash, well, tapirs falling to the ground dead. And they do, and his tribe eats, and they're not hungry. And then he teaches the rest of them how to use tools, these bone clubs, basically just leg bones. And they're still thirsty. They've only been drinking the blood of these tapirs, right? And they go to take back their watering hole. And this is slaughter. It's slaughter because this other tribe has no tools. They just think it's a normal display of threat against each other, like how things have always been done. But now Moonwatcher is like, screw you, this is our watering hole. You took it from us. I'm going to beat the hell out of One Ear. And he does. He kills One Ear with this leg bone. And the other tribe is completely shocked by this, just unable to deal with the threat of a leg bone. Because how would you? This is kind of like somebody with a machine gun coming to a sword fight, right? And we see Moonwatcher celebrating, and he throws the bone into the sky in celebration. And it immediately flashes over to 2001 in orbit, and we see the passage of a nuclear satellite, a satellite with a nuclear weapon on board. It's one weapon turning into another. And we're in modern space. And we have Blue Danube, a classical piece of music playing as we go through low Earth orbit. Now, thoughts about the dawn of mankind, Darlene, before we go into like the middle part.
It could have been shorter.
You think it could have been shorter?
Yes, but then again, I'm not liking this movie at all.
Yeah, and I'm on the exact opposite side of the fence.
I could
yes.
probably deal with it a lot more if I did not listen to it.
Okay. See, unlike a lot of movies, and this is where I'm like baffled. I understand that you have like this thing about discordant tones.
It
I
was giving me a headache, and it's got me a headache.
Okay, I get it, but unlike a lot of films, I understand where you're coming from. But this movie, the soundscape of it is integral to how the movie is presented.
How many times do I wear earplugs in the theater?
Almost every time we go, but we haven't gone for a long time. Because, COVID.
Yes.
How many times do I wear earplugs in the theater? Because
None.
they just turn to, yeah, I do. Because they turn it up too loud now.
And
Everyone has tinnitus, including me.
Especially when they make that ba-boom noise for TH, whatever that
it is. Mm-hmm.
that thing screams a headache to my head. And these noises that this movie did literally gave me a headache.
Okay. And that's fine. There's nothing. I'm not like criticizing you on that at all. I'm not. I'm just saying that in general, the soundscape of this movie is very important. Where there's a lot of movies that you could likely watch completely muted or without a soundtrack and not lose a lot from it. Especially with something like a movie that has this much visual storytelling happening in it. But as I said, like the beeps, the sound of air hissing, the music, it's so woven in. Anyway, modern Orbit. We get to see a ton of cool things, and Blue Danube is playing. And even you have to say Blue Danube is a beautiful song, right? Dun 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 dun.
Yes.
All right.
But it's in its entirety.
Yes, but here he's setting the scene. Kubrick is setting the scene because we get to see an unfinished ring station. We learn later that this is like ring station 5. So there's 4 others. This one is it's being constructed currently. It's not completely finished yet.
One side is, one side's not.
Yes, one side is, and it's spinning. So that's where most of the next scenes happen, is in the spinning ring section. Again, these sets are stunning when we actually enter them, and they all feel very real. We get to see a beautiful Pan Am rocket, a ramjet scramjet rocket, which you said looked like something. I can't even remember what you and I was like, what are you talking about? Yeah, beautiful like needle-like rocket with the big the swooped engine cutout at the end.
Yeah, I don't.
You said
remember
it
what
was
I
like
said.
a stylus or something like that, or a feather that it reminded you of,
I can't
or a
remember.
thorn. I don't know. It was, or a slipper. Maybe that's what it was.
I didn't say a slipper, but
And we get introduced to a stewardess that she has Pan Am branded grip shoes, and I thought this was fantastic. The acting in this was really cool. But go ahead, you were going to say something.
the bubble hair,
The hairnet.
hairnet that is nothing more than a.
Yeah, it's like a helmet almost, right? But it's just cloth. You liked it. You're like, no,
I
it makes sense.
it, but
it made sense, right? Because if you're in zero gravity, you don't want to have your big hair flying everywhere, right? So when you're in zero gravity going places, a lot of those quote unquote stewardesses would likely put those kinds of things on if you have long hair. Now, remember what I said was that hair is something that is a problem in space, right? Like, how do you even ask me, how do you shave in space? Well, I said there's 2 different ways. Either you have a big, powerful vacuum right there and an electric shaver that you shave your beard, or you really lather up and you have a towel and you shave like with a safety razor or something and clean your towel off because you don't want to have hair going everywhere, right? And a lot of men will actually either shave their heads before going into orbit or really trim their hair down short. Women are obviously different, but there was the thought in the 1960s that if women went into orbit, because most women had long hair, that they would just put on hairnets because that was the sort of idea, right? But it's no. If you're not wearing a helmet, obviously if you're wearing a helmet, you need to have your hair like put into something, right? It might be a little more difficult if you're having to wear a helmet, so you might want to actually have a shorter haircut because even putting it into like a tight bun would be difficult to. It might be uncomfortable.
I
to
think
have a helmet on.
the cap that they wear, the astronauts wear,
It wouldn't fit right with like a bun or something like that, right?
There are women that have
Yes.
those long hair in
Yes.
space today.
Yes, there are. And it's usually because they do put it into a tight bun or a long ponytail that they are able to tuck in with the help of the white room. You know, when they're getting into their suits, it's tucking it in properly and then making sure that it's not sitting right up against your spine, because when you're launching or under acceleration, it might actually hurt you.
I actually have long hair.
Yes. I know we got onto like a
and
sidetrack here.
Even today, I have problems wearing my hair in a car.
Mm-hmm.
How I like it. Because those headrests that are supposed to be preventing you from make my head where I want to have it is in the back of my head. And I have to do a lower bun because of those headrests.
Yeah.
I think that's why a lot of women today wear a low or very high bun.
But I thought the stewardess hair
Helmet,
cloth helmets actually were kind of cool.
They were neat.
Everything about the little details in these scenes are a joy, are an absolute joy, because you have the little Pan Am branded grip shoes, but it's not like she's walking around like there's gravity. Oh, she has grip shoes, I can just walk like normal. She's actually walking like she's taking delicate steps so she doesn't fly off the floor from her grip shoes losing grip, right? And do you know how they filmed the pen just floating in the air?
They had it as a...
Because if you held it with a string, it would sway no matter what because of the lights and air currents and things. It is so simple, yet it took them forever to figure this out. They put a pane of glass and then double-sided tape and stuck it to it. So if you watch very carefully, that when the stewardess comes up, you can actually see her pull the pen off the... But it's very subtle. It's very subtle. And it's such a simple, practical effect, but it looks flawless when it's shot in camera. Anyway, he's on... the character is actually that's on this flight is
Dr.
Haywood Floyd.
Floyd.
And he's like sleeping, and he's the only passenger on this dropship.
Because it's... he calls it the red light.
It's a red eye.
Red eye flight.
And it's clear from these scenes, since he is the only person that's on this flight, and the stewardess is walking around a cabin that has, let's say, dozens of seats, that space travel is fairly common. The only reason why Floyd is the only one on this, and it's not because of the red eye, it's because he's going to a restricted area. And it's likely that going to the ring station was a red eye, and he just so happened to be the only person there. It's the secondary trip when he goes from the ring station to the moon that's like, okay, there's a reason nobody's on board, right? But we're introduced to tons of really cool things as soon as he docks to the ring station. Again, it's all with Blue Danube. It looks very good real physics wise. Like the Pan Am ship is having to match the rotation of the ring station so it can dock in its central docking bay. And we go inside the ring station, and it's an entirely curved set where obviously looking at it, if you're inside one of those for real, it would look exactly like that. It's just that you would be able to look down the corridor and see people at an angle to you because their down is always directly down towards their feet on a ring station because it's rotating. That's how gravity works there. But it would be disorienting. Now, thankfully, Kubrick and the set designers designed a ring station that you could get away with having people 20 yards away and basically just walk down the slope because the slope was so gentle. So it didn't look like there was weirdness. But now later on in the movie, we get to the Discovery spin ring when they're on the spaceship, where it is actually a small ring, and they had to build the whole set to be able to rotate.
They rotated her too, the stewardess.
Oh yes, that's on the ship to the moon. They actually rotate the whole set as she walks up the wall and turns a corner and goes through a different corridor.
Goes through to feed the pilots.
Yes, and I said while we were watching it, during that scene, I absolutely, as a kid, I loved the food tray with like the little food packets and straws that
but
everyone got.
You're getting ahead of yourself, because on the space station, there's an important little thing. They
have a meeting.
A group that came by Aeroflot.
Yeah, Aeroflot, which is a detail I did not notice, or at least I don't remember.
And he asked, "Are you going up or down?"
Which is up the gravity well or down the gravity well. Yep, you're going up or down.
So it's whether you were going to the moon or to Earth.
Yes.
And they were coming from the moon to Earth.
Yeah,
and he's going from Earth to the moon.
Yes. And they said, and he Floyd ends up calling his daughter on a Bell video phone, and it's like a 3-minute call, and it's like $1.70 for long distance, which I guess in '68 would have been nuts for the amount of time he spent talking to her.
No, that was what you would pay for a long distance call.
And I'll disagree, because I'll say one thing. In the mid 1980s, I remember my grandmother making long distance phone calls for 10 cents a minute. Now, that being said, it would probably be like 5 cents a minute in the 1960s or something like that for long distance. So to me, that $1.70 charge for
it's like the first minute you had.
Yeah,
that was the expensive part, and then the other part was get lower.
But I think it was supposed to be a reference to the fact that things would be more expensive in 2001. This was just a quick phone call, and it was $1.70. That's nuts. But anyway, it's a video call from outer space
to his daughter. His daughter doesn't allow.
She's adorable.
She's adorable. It's her birthday tomorrow, and it's also somebody else's birthday too. I forget whose that is. So birthday is a very big thing.
That's later on in the mission. I think that's Frank. It's Frank's birthday later on the Discovery mission. I think it's Frank.
Anyway, that seems to be something that he wanted to point out several times.
Yes, again, because a lot of 2001 deals with the idea of life and evolution and change. So a birthday is kind of one of those representations of change and growth and life and death.
And the kid wants a bush baby.
I want a bush baby. And he's like, oh, okay, whatever. All right, kid, I gotta go.
And I'm like,
Daddy has to go.
What is a bush baby?
And
I was appalled.
I absolutely love everything on the space station because it's all branded with stuff that
IBM.
Well, there's
Hilton.
Yeah,
Bell.
there's a Hilton that's on the ring station, but there's also the Howard Johnson Earthlight Room, and I guess that's the lounge. It's the Howard Johnson Earthlight Room, and I was so happy to see that because that's something that you don't really see, like those Howard Johnson lounges. Those were a big thing back in the 60s, like the 50s and 60s.
Oh.
They even mention them in Blues Brothers as a joke. That's where the band is playing that he has to go get.
Oh, okay.
Anyway.
But he comes across these people from Aeroflot.
Well, that are flying on Aeroflot. They're Soviet scientists.
And they know him. He knows them. I'm surprised on this one.
Mm-hmm.
On the Soviets.
Yeah.
One guy, 3 females.
And they're all doctors.
I think
that was Kubrick being smart.
And it's like saying something, because when you reverse it, there is, on the Discovery, there is 1 female.
Yes.
And the rest are male.
Okay, yes, but the woman that's on Discovery
is in
hibernation. She has no lines. But we'll get to the 2 actors that
I'm just like, this is another statement here.
Okay.
That I wanted to gear in, that this might be some kind of thing that he's putting in there to.
See, I think Kubrick understood that there was more egalitarianism in the Soviet Union in some way, shape, and form. Because if you look at all of the U.S. personnel, and maybe I shouldn't say U.S., I should probably say Western personnel, because to me, there's a question whether the moon base at, where is it, damn it? Clavius is a NATO base or a U.S. only base, because there's a flag that's not very clear what it is.
It looked like it had a star on it or
it
something.
It could be a U.S. Air Force flag, but it also could be a NATO flag. That's my first thought was NATO, and I'll probably have like people yelling at their computers listening to this going, no, I know 2001, that's X, Y, or Z flag.
But he gets told that there has been no communication in the last 10 days by telephone, and that they turned away a Soviet emergency landing crew
that actually did have a problem.
That had a problem.
It wasn't like a fake out for them to figure out what's going on.
And something about a plague.
Yeah, that they've heard that there's a plague, and so I always write down in my notes Haywood. His name is Dr. Floyd or whatever. He says, look, I can't comment on it. So it seems to me like the guy that is actually questioning Haywood here is kind of a politico of sorts. And Haywood is clearly a politico of sorts dealing with this. And we find out what he's really doing in a bit. But he then ends up getting on another dropship to go to the moon. And again, it's another Pan Am vehicle, and we have those food packs. We actually have an RCA Whirlpool food preparation machine, and I thought that was a joy because RCA and Whirlpool broke up in '68. They actually broke up in 1968, so that was a very strange combination to see. But then it was very cool to see because I grew up in St. Joe Benton Harbor, and that was one of the headquarters of Whirlpool. So it still is. There's still a big Whirlpool presence there. But yeah, it's a Whirlpool thing, and the stewardesses end up walking up walls because they rotate the whole sets. The miniature for this set, for this ship, is stunning in its detail. Like when it's coming into the moon, its legs unfold from these little like pontoons on its side, and when it lands on the surface on a landing pad, all the little hydraulic pieces move in its legs so you can actually see how this thing functions.
Yeah, and why he's calling it a drop ship.
It looks just like a drop ship from Battletech.
It's a circular cylinder.
Yeah, it looks like a sphere that has engines on one side and then legs on that same side where the engines are, so it can land on the legs. It looks like a drop ship.
The pilots are on the top.
Yes.
And the ring around it is where all the people...
Yes, there's a passenger deck. So you can really tell that there's like... You can see how this... where all the stuff is on this dropship. Like, the lower levels are clearly like fuel and engines, correct? Because the engines are actually inset inside the dropship. You have the habitation deck, quote unquote, where all the passengers are. You have a service deck, which is where probably life support and the crew tend to live and work, let's say. And then you have the flight deck, which is right at the top. So there might be like actually 4 full decks in this thing, but it looks like it's more like about 7 or 8 stories tall.
But the pilots are on a different... They're 90 degrees.
Yes.
They're
laying on their backs. Their backs are towards the engines. So when the engines are firing, they're basically laying on their backs, whereas the passengers are sitting with their butts towards the engine. So they would feel like they're sitting in a regular chair when the engines fire. But that makes a lot of sense to me because, again, if you're piloting one of these ships, you want to see where the hell you're going as the pilots. So you want to be facing forward.
But it makes landing a bitch.
But they have those screens that come up that actually show them the rear projected what's going on. And then like even the computer graphics that they use in this, which, believe it or not, is they're all made by Stanley Kubrick. It actually is rear projected effects that he made, that they're rear projecting onto these tiny little screens. And that's why some of the screens actually have scratches in the film that's being looped, and so you can see these repeating scratches in some of it because Stanley Kubrick, I guess, well, not I guess, but Stanley Kubrick ended up taking hundreds and hundreds of takes of certain scenes to get it perfectly. In fact, it's actually said that there's over 400 hours of film made for this, over 400 hours, and that it got edited down into this. But anyway, the dropship lands on the moon, and there's a briefing, and we learn that there's been a discovery that has been made, and that there's been a cover story about this epidemic, and the government is really sorry. He actually doesn't say that. He says the council is very sorry about the inconvenience that it's given you, and how you haven't been able to contact your families. Yes, this sucks, but this cover story is in place because of a discovery that was made. And he said, we have to keep this quiet because there's the risk of what he says social disorientation about the discovery, that there might be
The bad part about
panic.
this one is they didn't conform to the movements that you would have on the moon.
What do you mean?
One of the guys to introduce Dr. Floyd walks rapidly to a seat.
Well, I said it would be very difficult for a large set like that to have people on harnesses to simulate 1/6 gravity on the moon, because everything else about this movie is really solid about the gravity work. But yeah, it would be very difficult to have filmed and then edited out the harnesses that would have had to be used, because you would have to, man, I don't know if there was a way to do that in 1968.
But they could have done it just like that one, the last movie we watched that was, just move slower.
Oh, the Soviet one? Or you could have done it just like the stewardesses did earlier in this film. You have grip shoes, and you're moving slowly and carefully so you don't look like you're bunny hopping or bouncing off the ceiling, because these ceilings are like low enough to be regular ceilings. And if you're just walking around your house in 1/6 gravity, you're going to be bouncing your head off the ceiling, right? So I can understand if these people were just kind of walking slowly and
these
taking
people
it
are
easy.
supposed to have been stuck on this moon for a while, and he just
made it here. So he's used to Earth gravity. He'd be bouncing off the ceiling, right?
I'm not talking about Dr. Floyd. I'm talking about the person that introduced him. Goes back to his chair next to where Dr. Floyd was sitting, and he does it in rapid military stride.
Do you know that there's actually, I can think of a way to get around that, but they don't show it. And this is something that Kubrick could have shown, and it would have solved all the problems. That, believe it or not, on a planet, okay, let's say you're on Mars, you can build a ring and spin it, but you put the floors at an angle inside so that the spin combined with the gravity pulling you down towards the center of the planet equals the proper angle that the floor is set at 1G. It can work. And the science is fine. Do you see what I'm trying to describe? Usually I draw these things out for you, but I can't really do that on while we're talking.
Yes, but it was very. What I'm saying is that his motion, not Dr. Floyd's, because Dr. Floyd didn't move as fast as this guy did.
Yeah.
And it really jarred you with all the rest of the slow motion everybody was doing.
So we also, the last thing that Dr. Floyd says is that if the public was made aware of what has happened, panic may ensue. Okay, so even if you haven't seen this movie before, you know what the hell has been discovered. Or at least you should if you're a fan of science fiction. Alien life has clearly been discovered, and for some reason the US is hiding it. Well, hiding it from even the Soviets at this point. Now, I don't know if that would actually have flown, so to speak, all the way through the Cold War. I think at the end of the Cold War, we likely would have actually shared that kind of information. But in 1968, I can see why Kubrick would have, and Arthur C. Clarke, who also helped write this screenplay, because Arthur C. Clarke, why they made that decision, that it was kind of like covered up, because they ended up finding something that they called the Tycho magnetic anomaly. and we get another scene of a shuttle going out over the moon's surface.
To Tycho Crater.
Now, again, these scenes are pieces of art. This is some of the matte painting stuff that had to be hand done, and usually these kinds of special effects are done by one person. And it turned out that after Kubrick got done piecing together the movie and knowing what shots he had to make for these matte paintings, like the spaceships going across and all that, that it would have turned out to be 13 years worth of work for one person. See, he hired, I guess, 13 people, and it took him a year to do it. But all of it was done by hand to properly move these things across. Everything about these scenes is art. So anyway, Dr. Floyd is going out there with a couple other astronauts. They joke about how people are getting better at making sandwiches in space, or at least like extruding sandwiches or 3D printing sandwiches. It's made clear to me that the way they talk about these sandwiches, it's that they're somehow manufactured, that they're not real.
Oh, I did not get that, but
because one joke's like they're getting better at making these, aren't they? And to me, that's like, what are you talking about? Getting better at making sandwiches? That seems pretty dumb to like.
I don't think since
cool.
the invention of the sandwich, it's going to be any different.
Well,
because
I know.
I don't think that.
That's why I'm saying that I think it was like a Whirlpool like 3D printer printing out like printing out not a replicator, but you know what I mean, like 3D printing out a sandwich.
I hope not.
Which would have been far better than the freaking moon, the food packs that you get on Discovery later on here. Because believe it or not, Kubrick actually thought all that out. Like, how would you eat in zero gravity? Well, you would have food paste that stick to plates. So you want sticky paste that sticks to these plates. And all the utensils were specifically designed for this film by a Danish architect.
It was a spork.
It was not a spork. It was specifically designed for this movie by a Danish.
It looked like a spork.
Believe it or not, Darlene, to this day, you can order those utensils. The style has never gone out of style. I want to get a.
It looks like a spoon and a fork.
Yes, one of them does. One of them kind of looks like a spork, but it's the specific style of these. Anyway, they go out to the Tycho magnetic anomaly. We realize that it's 4 million years old, and it's a monolith.
And you have something that is very human in today's society. Let's stand in front of something and take a picture.
Well, yeah, because it's so stunning. Like, how, hey, it's an alien artifact.
Let's all line up and look at the camera and take a picture. And that's when the sound goes horrible.
Yeah, there's this piercing whistle, and everyone's like stumbling around holding their heads, and then it cuts off. Boom. 18 months later, Jupiter mission. And we're introduced to Discovery 1. Okay? Discovery 1 is a beautiful ship. It is a ball at the end of a neck.
I will say one thing that I think was really good.
Yeah.
Okay? You have him listening to Dave, which is Dave Bowman, Dr. Dave Bowman, listening to news that's coming from Earth, and it's about before they even took off. So it explains to you who these people are, Hal, and that.
Hal.
Without.
He's actually listening to classical music when we're first introduced to him, when he's jogging around the entire.
Yes, there's that.
But yeah, it's actually an interview. It's not an interview before they left. It's an interview when they're already 7 light minutes away, because the announcer on BBC 12 says, we've edited out the time delay. They remembered the time delay, which a lot of sci-fi stuff totally ignores, even when they don't have faster than light communications. They just are like, hey, look, no time delay, big deal. I'll just talk back to Earth. And it is so important in this movie, because if you listen to when they are communicating back to Mission Control will say, per your message on 1934, whatever, because that's the hour and minute. And they actually have the hour and minute on the return transmission. So you can tell that, yes, they are some light minutes away, and Mission Control has spent X amount of time thinking about this problem. Anyway, Discovery is this beautiful piece of machinery. It's a ball at the end of a long neck, and then there's a drive section at the back. Okay, and it has 3 engine bells. Okay, we never really see the ship accelerating or decelerating. We see it just moving through empty space slowly but surely. Correct. The neck actually has all these little pods that are stuck.
Again,
to
it looks like a bone.
I see. I
Or a
wouldn't.
snake.
Okay, fair. No, to me it looks like a. It looks like a wand. To me it looks just like, it looks like Discovery. It's not really a bone to me.
It's got a spear with a bunch of little boxes behind it. One of them has this huge doggone satellite, and the first thing I said was, that would not be sitting upright
Okay.
if you were going through space.
So we have 2 characters that are awake. There are 5 human crew members on the ship, but 3 are asleep in hibernation. 2 are awake, and it's Dr. Dave Bowman, played by Keir Dullea, who is the one of 2 people that returned for 2010, playing their same character.
Well, everybody else dies.
Spoiler. But yeah. And we have Dr. Frank Poole, played by Gary Lockwood. Now, you may know Gary Lockwood from Star Trek, the original series. He played Gary Mitchell. One of the people that when they passed through the galactic barrier, that he became a god, basically. This is after Star Trek, so he's already had his, he was already Gary Mitchell. To me, that's where I knew him from. And I'm like, oh my God, it's Gary Mitchell. Anyway, we learned that there is a 6th crew member, and it's HAL 9000. Now, again, one of these pieces of trivia that almost everyone knows that has watched this film, HAL is just 1 letter less in the alphabet from IBM. So if you take 1 letter away off IBM, it's HAL, H-A-L. And he is a sentient computer, or at least an AI. Let's say he's an AI. He has emotions, and the computing is flawless. There's never been an error in
with the HAL 9000 series.
Yeah, with the HAL 9000 series. And it's been around, the HAL 9000 series has been around for at least, let's say, 10 years. Because we learned that HAL 9000 that's on Discovery was initiated in January of 1992. And this is supposed to be 2001 plus 18 months. All right. So it's already let's just say 2002. He's been alive for 10 years. HAL. And I am saying HAL is alive. HAL is a person. Now, a lot of this movie here, for this central part, I'm not going to go through each and every scene, but what we are introduced to is the fact that HAL seemingly is malfunctioning. Now, I will also argue that HAL is not malfunctioning, because it becomes clear that he is not. There are no errors that the HAL 9000 has ever made, unless it is through human error in programming. And it turns out that all the problems in this truly are because of...
Well, they have a 72 hours to fix the communication failure that's going to take place.
And it's
per HAL.
Yeah, and HAL lied about this. And the reason I need to sum this up, but HAL basically has 2 conflicting sets of orders, or at least how HAL perceives it are 2 conflicting orders. His primary mission is to go to Jupiter to find the monolith that the first monolith on the moon transmitted to, because people back on Earth found where that screeching was sent. It was a radio burst going out to Jupiter space. And it turns out, yeah, there's a monolith floating out there. But they weren't HAL was not supposed to HAL was not supposed to inform the crew or anyone else that the primary mission was to actually go out and get this monolith. Because again, Haywood does not want the public to panic. And if the crew actually knew what was going on, that they might have blabbed. But the problem is that HAL, since this is his primary mission, Hal is starting to consider the actions of the crew hostile to the primary mission. And the reason he comes up with this, and this is somewhat in the movie and somewhat in the book, is that
You don't really get that in the.
in the movie it's not as clear, but since Hal knows that the crew does not know and he is not supposed to tell them, that means it is likely, logically speaking, that the crew is actually hostile to the primary mission. And he's concerned about the crew's own actions. And then he fakes this communications thing because he doesn't want the crew communicating back to Earth to like try to undermine him, because his orders are to basically perform this mission. So he fakes this communication issue, and then since there's nothing wrong with this communications module, the crew are like, dude, Hal's malfunctioning. There's never been any kind of malfunction in a HAL 9000. We might need to take him offline. And Hal reads their lips.
They also have where a twin of Hal
on Earth
doesn't see any.
Yeah, the HAL 9000 back at Mission Control says the HAL 9000 on Discovery is insane. Well, not insane, is wrong. Is in error. That there's something wrong with your HAL. So yeah, you have Dr. Bowman and Dr. Poole basically saying we might need to unplug HAL. Hal sees this and is threatened again because now he's like, if I'm taken offline, the primary mission won't be able to be completed.
It goes to intermission.
Yes, we have an intermission.
Another black
with music.
With that discordant music.
Hal basically has to come to the conclusion that he has to take out the crew in order to perform the primary mission. So he ends up, when they're going to go back out and like deal with the module, it's actually Gary Lockwood as Dr. Poole.
Put the box back that they just.
It's Dr. Poole goes back out in one of the pods, and Hal takes control of the pod and knocks him away, killing him.
Yes,
basically.
Pulls his the connection from his helmet to the eBay suit.
And Dr. Bowman's like, "Oh, the hell with this! I'm gonna get in this pod and go rescue my friend," because he doesn't know that his friend's line has been cut.
But he forgets his helmet.
And he gets in the pod and he goes back out there.
Something you would have been trained not to do.
I know it's the one screw up, but again, it's his friend. He's kind of panicking in a little bit that his friend's just spinning out of control away from the ship. I can understand that moment of panic, right? Because they're not even in contact with Mission Control at this point.
Yeah, I understand that, but just like on an airplane, you put your mask on.
Yes.
Before you put the mask on your child. And it's hard for them to communicate to mothers that this is necessity.
What I would say is that
they did get trained here to do that.
What it does do is a piece of drama, though. I will say it actually adds to it because it allows there to be some exposition between Hal and Dave later. Anyway, Dave goes into the pod, goes out to save his friend, and realizes that he's dead, but he's still going to bring his body back, right? So he brings his body back, and he goes, open the pod bay doors, Hal. And Hal's like, I'm sorry, I can't do that, Dave. And there's that whole...
It goes on for a long time.
You say it goes on for a long time, but again...
and then Dave decides he's going to pull off that doggone...
Emergency hatch. He leaves his friend's body. He pushes his friend's body away, knowing that he is dead.
Because he did even say to Hal, "I can go through the emergency air, but Dave, you forgot your helmet."
That's going to be very difficult for you, Dave. Like Hal is just completely. He's not angry. Hal's just doing what he feels his job is. Again, Hal is not a villain in this. He is a victim of bad information, bad programming. It's a human error that caused this.
It's evil.
Hal's
what he
evil?
did.
Yes.
Which, if any time we go to have that kind of, we really need Asimov's law to.
Yes. No, I agree. But remember, like, Hal's actions are logical with the information he's given. They are. What he did was still wrong, yes, but he's a
And
victim of bad information, of
even
bad
if
programming.
that was what Dave does next is he shoots himself from
the pod
the
into
pod
the emergency
into
bay.
the merge, and it's kind of interesting because he bounces off the wall,
Because of the air pressure, shoots him into the airlock. He bounces off the wall and then
comes
flying
back,
Yeah.
and he could have gone right back out.
Yeah, but he stumbles into the wall and then hits the emergency close and pressurization, which I think they did a very good job of shooting that. That was a very well done scene.
But he knows that there is no pressure on the other side.
Yeah, so he pressurizes the airlock again, and probably again shoots himself into the pod bay to grab the helmet. Is his ears going to be screwed? Yes. Is he going to have ruptured blood vessels everywhere? Absolutely. But it is survivable. It is survivable.
And he puts on the green.
He just grabs the first helmet, right?
And Hale is sitting there as Dave goes by. He's like, Dave, you don't want to do this. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and you actually kind of feel bad for Hal.
You're supposed to feel bad.
I do.
But I'd be like, and Dave obviously does because he's crying.
Yeah, but and I also understand why Dave is doing what he's doing. Like, Dave has no choice but to do this. And I feel bad for Hal because,
if this was like, if you think about it, if Hal was a human, you do the same thing. You would kill the person after killing the whole crew.
Yes.
They are in danger to yourself, to the mission.
Yes.
Everything.
Yes, but remember that, like, Dave was close. Hal was a person. He's a crew member. He was a friend.
Yes, Dave was the one that spent the most time with Hal.
Yeah.
You get that because they talk, they play chess.
And Hal even says...
Frank doesn't do that. He treats him...
It treats him like a computer, but still like more... Well, I would say he treats him more like... more than a computer, but less like a person. Where Dave was like, yeah, he treated him like a person.
But there was all these conversations that were between Dave and Hal that were psychological.
Yes. And remember, that's kind of where Hal's programming started conflicting, because Hal needed to make psychological reports about the crew. And he started realizing that the crew's reliability wasn't 100%. And therefore, the primary mission was threatened. Therefore, he had to make these bad decisions. Well, anyway, Hal says he's afraid. Hal is dying. Again, this life and death motif that's all the way through this movie.
And this is where, as he's pulling out these memory
he
chips,
starts singing.
You have Dave crying, and Hal says, "I'm afraid. I don't want to. I'm losing my memory."
Mm-hmm.
And he starts going into the long distance ones. He doesn't do like 7. There's certain ones he's not pulling out.
Yeah, because he has to have the computer control for certain ship systems. And that's what he's leaving. He's basically taking Hal's brain offline, his higher functions, his consciousness, because Hal is an AI. You might argue, is he self-aware? I would say he is, because at the very least his reactions are very human. And
then at the end of it,
he sings.
But when he goes down to no slow,
yeah,
and then it stops, they're in Jupiter.
Well, they skip ahead again. They go Jupiter space.
But he's in that same spot, and you have on the screen comes this.
He's not in the
mission.
same spot.
He's not in the same spot?
He's in the pod. He goes out in the pod. You see the pod leaving the ship.
No. The mission comes on after he's pulled the memory cards.
Oh, the little briefing, and it's from it's from Dr. Haywood. It's saying this video should be playing to you once you've reached Jupiter space. But here's the thing: it wasn't supposed to play then. They weren't in Jupiter space yet. This is again a part of Hal malfunctioning. When he pulled all the higher functions out, that block went away, and that's why the video started playing immediately, because now there's no longer a block. Now Hal should have been able to play it. therefore it is. And Haywood explains exactly what's happening. That, hey, we discovered an alien artifact. You are being sent out there for this mission, and now it goes to the Jupiter space, and we have this beautiful vista of Jupiter space, of the moons of Jupiter, the sun making these beautiful crescents on the moons, etc. But anyway, Dave goes out in a pod and encounters the monolith that's there. And he basically goes through
And
a
this
wormhole.
is where I had to stop because that noise that was
It's
on.
atmosphere, this music called Atmosphere. But the point is that he goes into this wormhole and he sees what I interpret. Again, you may interpret this differently, but what I interpret it is that he sees the creation of the universe. He sees the formation of stars, galaxies, planets. He sees the birth of the first life forms.
You also see flashes of Dave, and you see pain on his face.
He's scared. He's terrified. Yes.
And then it goes into what looks like the Big Bang, but it comes off of as his eye.
Well, it flashes back to his eye. It's like this is all he is. He's only a witness to this. Dave has no body.
And
like he's just this eye.
This
seeing.
part of it is where you really cannot be. You cannot have
photosensitive.
Yes, if you're
say that.
photosensitive, this would bring on your seizure.
And by the way, this movie was made a huge amount of money by kids at the time dropping LSD and going to see this specific part of the movie. By the way, because I guess this was a big deal. Like this was very trippy. And I mean, I'm watching it completely without alcohol or any kind of drugs, and it's trippy. It is trippy. But he sees like the creation of even life, and then he encounters, to me, what represents life forms, like intelligent life forms, or devices built by intelligent life forms. And he realizes, oh crap, I'm not alone. There's things here. And then it gets surreal. You think it's surreal up until this point.
I didn't watch this.
I know. Darlene walked out, and I'm trying to describe it to her. Everything's normal, seemingly. But he's like, you see the inside of a pod, the pod that he was in, and it says like data error, no signal, etc., etc. Like all the instruments inside are malfunctioning. And then outside the pod, there's a hotel room. There's this white lit floor with classical kind of statues and artwork. And you're hearing this, Dave's still breathing in his suit. And you realize Dave's outside of the pod and he's kind of looking around going, what the hell? And he starts exploring the hotel room and he sees himself in a mirror and he realizes that he's older. And he's kind of freaked out about that. He has like wrinkles and things. And he's in the bathroom and then he looks back through the door and sees a person eating a meal at a table, an older man. And he realizes it's himself. Dave in the spacesuit disappears. The man continues eating his meal. Dave continues eating his meal at the table. He's wearing like a blue velvet smoking jacket. He's eating a nice, beautiful meal, and he drops his glass, like a crystal glass, onto the floor, and it shatters. And he looks really upset, and he reaches down to take it, and he looks back at the bed and sees a dying version of himself, very old. And he's a little shocked. And then he disappears. And we have the dying version of Dave laying in the bed, who's like reaching out his hand, kind of like Adam towards God in the Sistine Chapel. And at the foot of the bed is the obelisk. It's standing there, just completely out of place in this vision. And we see the camera kind of closing in on the obelisk. And then we look back at the bed, and old Dave isn't there. Dying Dave isn't there. There's something else.
This
And
is why I say this is nothing more than a series of events.
No, it's supposed to show the life and death of Dave to become something new. He becomes the Star Child. he basically looks like a sort of fetus in this bubble of light, and you realize that he's evolved, he's grown into something new. And then the hotel room goes away, and you see the Earth and the moon from space, and there's the Star Child like looking back at home, but knowing that's not home anymore, that everything is home. He's outgrown the cradle. This is no longer where I need to be. I know. And then that's the end. So I know I've gone through a lot of this in detail. To me, there is a plot. This very much is a movie, but it also is a visual spectacle. I will say that. This is something that probably should be seen on a big screen. I would love to see this on the big screen with you, as long as you brought like big freaking earmuffs and earplugs for the times where Atmospheres is playing. But on the big screen, this had to look mind-blowing. Just the model stuff with the spaceships in space, mind-blowing. This is model work and special effects that would not be matched, I would say, not until the 80s, because I don't even think Star Wars is as good as this. Even though I like the model work that's in Star Wars, it does not match this. To me, Darlene, well, okay, what works in this movie for you? Let's hear some positivity from you.
I like all but that one scene of how they treated gravity.
Yes. The science realism in it is very good.
There is no up or down
Mm-hmm.
in space.
Mm-hmm.
You have to create your own up and down.
Mm-hmm.
That I like that they did that.
Mm-hmm.
I like that the places were small, except for the space station.
But that makes sense, right?
The space station didn't. It was a corridor. You know, you'd think that since it's supposed to be like a rest over space, you'd have a hallway and a lot of doors for places to sleep.
But it's
or coffin hotels.
There is a hotel there, but like I said, that's like the inner floor. You have all the floors that are below that in the ring station. That's not the only floor in the ring station. That's the transit level, right? So like people that are getting off spaceships go to the transit level. So you want that kind of open?
It reminded me of
it's an airport
JFK
terminal. Yeah, it's an airport
terminal.
But that's exactly what he was going for. He was going for this kind of sterile, blank airport feel. That's exactly what it is. It's not supposed to be high-tech, fancy craziness. It's supposed to be banal and bland.
And on Discovery, I said this to you. I said, that looks like the ceiling tile that he's walking on.
Yes. The sets in this are stunning, right? Like the Discovery, the main habitation area, that whole set can rotate. It cost nearly $1 million to build that set. The whole thing can move. So when he's jogging around the entire rotating ring, he's jogging around the ring because the whole set is rotating. That is amazing. See, it's not just the sets in this that are stunning. It's the world building. It's the little details. Oh, it's Pan Am. Here's this Whirlpool food processor. It's the little things that
gets you like. It's the things like the what's the other guy? Not Dave, but the other one.
It's Frank.
Frank comes out of the center part.
Yeah.
And then has to come down.
He comes out of the axis where there's no gravity, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And he has to come down to the bottom by climbing down a ladder. Yeah, because gravity's real low at the center of axis.
And you're still seeing Dave jog around.
Yeah, just spinning around. It's brilliant. No, but I mean, it's the little details. It's the little details in this movie where you're like, okay, that feels real. You know, you didn't have to show that dropship's hydraulics moving on its legs, that it's like taking its weight. You didn't have to. It could have just landed and it would have looked amazing. But then you realize, crap, that whole model has like functional looking hydraulics that sit there and just compress. Darlene's messing with things on the computer desk.
Yes, I am.
But it's the world building, like I said, that these little tiny pieces of detail that you don't have to go into the details of people's uniforms, but you did in this. And because you did, it looked really good. It felt more real. You felt more of a connection to it. Like in 1968, you would have felt a large connection to a lot of these little tiny details rather than us, right?
What I gotta say is that the stewardess, I don't think that Velcro would have kept you on the floor.
It's not supposed to be Velcro. It's just, they just say grip shoes.
Yes, but that's what
it's gecko. They have like gecko feet.
I still think it would be mag boots that you'd probably be.
Yeah, but mag boots are a little tough because you often have to put a lot of force into pulling them off the surface that you're on. So like Velcro is better because you can use leverage to move. But they're not supposed to be Velcro. It's supposed to be sort of like the gecko feet. Anyway, special effects are fantastic. I think the concept of this movie, that it's a first contact, but it's not really a first contact because these aliens have been watching us for millions of years, that theoretically they may have awakened our intelligence in the first place, and that they've been watching us ever since. That they're interested in us at the very least.
But who's to say that they were not watching us to see when we hit to...
Yeah. It's possible. And like I said, when we were watching the early hominids, I said, it's very possible that the entire point of the monolith being there is that it was a coincidence that it was there. It's just that its sheer otherworldliness, its sheer alienness, its out of placeness made the hominids of Moonwatcher's group, or in Moonwatcher specifically, to try to understand it, since it was so different. And through that thought process awoke the one idea of tools. They're like, this truly alien thing was there, and we have to try to understand it. Darlene will say that what does not work in this is the music. Correct?
What I would say does not work is how long and sterile some of the stuff is. In the music, yes, there's some of it that's really good, but some of it is just way too long, slow, and
I'm on the other side of it. I understand what you're saying. I understand where you're coming from, but I'm on the other side of it, where I would say that the music in this and the sound work firmly falls into this works, because it is not only classical music that's beautiful and elicits feelings in you, it directly impacts the scenes that it's in a positive way, in a way that the filmmaker is intending for it to actually impact you emotionally and even physically.
it was making me sick.
I know, but you generally don't have a good reaction to sound anyway in movies, like when it's loud or it's discordant. And remember, the discordancy in this is purposeful, right? Like it's there to put you on edge. It's there to
I know
make
what
you
it's
feel
supposed to do, but it does it
too well for you.
It literally makes me ill.
Acting. What do you think about the acting? Does it fall into this works, average?
It's
or
average.
You think it's average?
I think it's average.
I'll say almost everyone's average. Almost everyone.
I think they use, looking at Hal's, the eye of Hal, they put that way too much.
Okay. I think the acting was actually, I would say, rises into this works for two people. Hal, the guy that played Hal, his voice is done by Douglas Rain, because I think the acting there, that kind of banal, monotone, but still conveying emotion and meaning, took a lot of voice acting work. And I think that does rise into this works. And then the guy that played Dave, Keir Dullea, I think actually did an incredible job emoting and dealing with some pretty, like you said, he's there when he's unplugging Hal, and he is so upset doing it. Like, that's acting. That's acting. And him dealing with this terrible situation. Again, he's just acting his way through it. Gary Lockwood as Dr. Frank, he's fine. I think he does a very good job, but I don't know if I would raise it into the same level as the others. Because I really like Gary Lockwood. I think he's a very good actor. I just don't think he has as much to do in this movie as Keir Dullea. Opinion? Hand gesture. Okay.
I don't know. What?
Don't know?
You know my opinion of it. I wouldn't watch it again.
You wouldn't watch it again. I highly recommend the movie. And I can't believe you wouldn't highly recommend the movie to people as long as they understood that you didn't like the sound. Because, I mean, this is not only a movie, it's a piece of art.
It's art, but it's...
There's a reason why we're doing it for 150. Like, it is a seminal piece of science fiction work.
There was a reason why I never finished the movie.
Okay, but this is one of the most important films to see and understand for science fiction in the modern era. Like, the reason we do Earth versus Soup is to understand where science fiction came from, science fiction and weirdness came from, to understand where it is today. And I don't think you can possibly understand science fiction today without understanding 2001. Are we going to do 2010? I doubt it. Maybe I can watch it with you. It's not the same thing as 2001 at all. It's not a Kubrick film. It doesn't have the same weirdness. There's only two characters that return, and that's Hal and Dr. Dave.
Is it the same Hal?
There are two Hals.
I know there was one on Earth. There's more
Hals. But yeah, like the original Hal is there, and he's very sorry for what's happened. So I think we'll leave it there. I love this movie, but your mileage might vary if you don't have 2.5 hours of time to spend with it. If you're photosensitive or audio sensitive, you may not appreciate it like Darlene, but it's brilliant to me. It's brilliant. So I'm Aaron.
I'm Darlene. Good evening.
And keep watching the skies.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at thisweekingeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.